Dear audience, dear listeners, I'm very happy to greet you at a second panel of our event on Belarus. And we've gathered once more to discuss a topic which I believe is very important and rarely discussed in the public, a European strategy for Belarus. Now, I believe there are two types of strategies that we must touch upon today. One strategy should be crafted in Brussels and Washington to coordinate and determine how the West will approach Belarus in the future. And then there is another strategy, crafted by the democratic forces of Belarus, representing the interests of the people of Belarus. Now, this event takes place thanks to the Nordic Council of Ministers that has kindly granted us funding for a second time in a row. The Belarus Research Network on Neighborhood Policy operates since 2022, and we have managed to create a network of experts and researchers from Belarus that are now feeding into the discussion on security in the Nordic and Baltic region. My name is Elizabeth Vizgunova-Vikmanen, to those of you listening online, and I am a researcher at the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and I have also been the coordinator of the Belarus Research Network on Neighborhood Policy. The network is constituted from this year by 5 institutions, as mentioned, the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, the Danish Foreign Policy Society, the Cultural Society Beladania, as well as the Danish Cultural Institute in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and the European Humanities University. Therefore, the Nordics, the Baltics, and the Belarusian counterpart are showing interest in discussing a free, sovereign, and democratic Belarus. However, today I've invited 2 guests with me. Firstly, Hanna LIUBAKOVA, a researcher and a journalist, as well as a non-resident fellow in the Atlantic Council. And Andis, KUDORS, a political scientist from Latvia.
Hello.
Now, I want to start with a quick assessment of the role of Belarus in the security situation in the Baltic states. Andis, what is your take on it?
Its role in unsecurity of our region, not security. So I am afraid there was a strategic miscalculation in the West when West decided what kind of approaches it will use in foreign policy toward Belarus and Russia. There was different approaches. Toward Belarus was normative foreign policy of EU. And the main author, theoretician of normative power, Jan Manners, is arguing that Europe is normative power. That means it can co-opt neighboring countries and influence processes, social and political processes in neighboring countries by using attractiveness of principles and values. So, and one of the key words in normative foreign policy is conditions. So European Union was ready to support financially Belarus only if there is some conditions are met from Belarusian side in transit to democratic system. So we didn't see this progress. That's why there was no normative results in Belarus. So, and approach to Russia was with a keyword engagement. And one of the examples of this engagement policy from the West toward Russia was like reset policy during Obama presidency in the United States. Why engage with Russia? The idea was to be sure that if Russia is engaged and somehow to some degree integrated with the West, it will be provider of security and peace in the near to European borders. So both approaches were incorrect. So we needed to switch them. I believe that the best approach toward Russia had to be normative. If Russia is not changing, and we saw this in 2004, 2005, 2006, just after Cold Revolution, that this transit to democracy in Russia stopped and went to opposite direction. So in that period, I believe West in general and United States and European Union in particular had to switch to more normative approach, and they didn't. We didn't. And in Belarus, in the same period, we needed to implement engagement because small Belarus, like relatively small if we compare with big international actors like Germany or United States and other like European big nations, could not influence badly political processes in European countries. So we needed to not to afraid to be engaged with Belarus, but now it's too late. Now I'm speaking about period before 2020. After that, I'm afraid everything is too late. Now, Moscow, I mean Kremlin, Russia, official Russia is controlling, in military strategic sense, is controlling Belarus. So if we want to now implement strategy, and strategy means we don't have to knock bricks wall with our head. If this is strategic goal, when we think about strategy, we always have to think about strategic goal. If this is strategic goal, and this is my movement, my actions, it's not necessarily always go to this direction. On the tactical level, I can change my directions in my policies. And this is what Russia did toward Belarus. They act through many years, they acted in strategic sense. How? If there is some economical problems in Belarus, Russia, with one hand, is giving some support, financial support, and with the other hand, they are taking. For example, Belarus gas, like company was sold to Russia in the first phase of economical problems in Belarus in 50%, and then in another moment, another period of time, another 50% was sold to Russia. So even if there is no Lukashenka in Belarus, because of strategic approach of Russia, Russia is still there. They're controlling some strategic assets, the same as they are doing in Armenia. They're also controlling energy sector. So this is strategic approach. European normative foreign policy is normative because it has to be normative. If you look to the European Union agreements, like Lisbon Agreement or others, whenever you are reading, if you are seeing something about foreign policy of European Union, common foreign policy, in the same chapter you will find words about support to democracy, respect to human rights, rule of law, free market, etc. So normative foreign policy is implementing, the very character of implementation of normative policy is transparent and democratic, and the goals and aims of normative foreign policy also is democracy. So it's good, but it's not flexible because there are conditions. So this is not strategy. It's more like bureaucracy, and in that sense is weak. If the other actor, like Russia, the same as China, are going without normative constraints, they are thinking in military strategic way. So what we have now, Russia is not provider of security and peace, so engagement policy failed. The same Belarus. Belarus is not democracy right now, but there was normative foreign policy, so both were wrong. And now the best strategy from the West is to support Ukraine, because Belarus, the processes, if you look from a strategic military, strategic perspective, processes in Belarus are strongly linked with Russia, with official Russia. And if there is significant changes in politics of Russia, I don't know when, how, but then we can hope that something will be changed in Belarus.
Thank you very much, Andis. So, Hanna, the last words of Andis, if I understand correctly, were that the strategic military perspective begs that we treat Belarus and Russia more or less in a similar manner, considering that our foreign policy now probably is very similar towards these two actors. But I believe there's another Belarus that we have not yet discussed. So what is your take on these two Belaruses, one within and connected to the official regime in Minsk, and one without, or the diaspora in Europe?
Sure, thank you very much. So first, let me start with, we obviously know that Lukashenko came to power in 1994. It's been 3 decades. And for all these 3 decades, the dictatorship in Belarus has been treated as an internal Belarusian problem, which is a huge mistake, because you see how it escalated. In 2020, there was torture, there were killings of people on the streets, right, during protests, and practically no painful sanctions were imposed for this repression. And UN Human Rights Council actually made a report saying that some of the crimes that the regime committed may amount to the crimes against humanity, which is a very serious crime. Yet after, no sanctions, no serious sanctions, no painful sanctions were imposed, and Lukashenko felt emboldened. He saw that, well, the EU was not decided, the US perhaps was more decided in the beginning, and so on. But then what happened? There was Ryanair, there was the hijacking of a civilian airplane, as you know, with foreign citizens on board, not only Belarusians. There was the migration crisis. Latvia know about this crisis very well because it continues till today. There was then invasion, and Lukashenko plays a material role here because he is one of the very few Putin's allies who gives so much support. Well, he gave the territory for the attack. Also, there are now, we cannot confirm it yet, but there are reports that, well, at least there was an announcement that Putin made of the deployment of Russian nuclear weapons on the territory of Belarus, which is another grave concern for the continent, right, and especially for bordering, for our neighbors. And it happened because Lukashenko was not stopped when he was supposed to be stopped, right? And something that we also discussed in the beginning, right, in the first part of the panel, that this pressure on the regime should be clearly defined here. The second, Elizabeth, what you asked about is, what about the other Belarus, right? So what also happened in the past 3 years? You see the huge, immense level of repression. We have only officially 1,500 political prisoners. There are many more in jail. The names we might not know, or they don't want to. The families of political prisoners don't want to be public, to get public. So there are many more in jail. At least 60,000 people went through prison in the past 3 years. So the violations, right, of rights have been huge. More than 1,200 civil society organizations have been dissolved or are in the process of dissolution. So this is serious. However, what we also see, we see that people, of course, the moods might change a little, right? But we see that most of the population, the majority of Belarusians, are against the deployment of Belarusian troops, are against Russian nuclear weapons in Belarus, and are against the attacks of Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. And this is not Lukashenko's well, how to say it, contribution here. This is because, well, these are Belarusians, and this is the society that is very peaceful, that, still consumes independent media, despite all the bans, despite all the propaganda, which is something that we should, keep in mind. You might not see protests at this point because of the level of state terror, but nothing changed. Belarusians did not start liking Lukashenko again, and this is something that we should remember. So despite all this, all these sort of things, Belarusians remain, at least if there is some talk about the consensus in Belarusian society, we can talk about this kind of opposition to the deployment of Belarusian troops and attacks of Ukraine. So this is the Belarus we should, I guess, also talk about, not only about this participation of the regime in the invasion.
Maybe, Hanna, I can ask a follow-up question already. So what can we do to actually support the other Belarus? Because obviously every European state should now consider that the policy should indeed be twofold.
Yeah, so regarding this twofold policy, again, this is something we've been discussing for all these years, right? We talk about sanctions, we talk about pressure, we talk about all the legal pressure that can be imposed on the regime, not only economic pressure, right? In more than 50 countries, when when it comes to economic pressure, more than 50 countries have imposed sanctions on Belarus. The regime of Belarus is currently one of the most sanctioned sort of entities in the world, and all kind of major state, sectors of the economy have been sanctioned, such as oil, potash, steel, and wood, which is crucial. Some of the banks were also sanctioned and disconnected from SWIFT. This hasn't been enough for several reasons. Firstly, because of Russia. Of course, because Russia supports Lukashenka, because Russia needs Lukashenka and his supportive hand in the invasion, but also because there are loopholes and there is sanction invasion, and this is the area where, of course, the EU and the US and other countries can help. So more coordinated strategy on sanctions, closing loopholes, sanction monitoring. These are the steps that should be done. When we talk about support for civil society, for the other Belarus, the one that represents the people, again, I cannot even describe how important it is to support independent media and civil society, because they are the ones, when we talk about media, what Belarusians consume is kind of immediately linked, connected to their views, right? They oppose the attacks of Ukraine because they consume independent media. They oppose nuclear weapons because they consume independent media. So they should be supported. I cannot even stress this enough. But also what I think is now lacking, and this is a huge, huge problem, and this is connected to the first sentence that I mentioned, that it has been considered, Belarus dictatorship has been considered an eternal problem. So Belarus, democratization of Belarus should be prioritized. And for several reasons, because of regional security, because it plays and has a unique strategic role on the continent, because it's between Russia and other countries. Second, it's because democratization of Belarus would make Putin weaker, for sure, and sort of taking out Belarus from Russia's control and Russia's zone of influence would definitely make Putin weaker, and would help I guess, kind of strengthen, right, the security of the continent.
Thank you very much, Hanna. Andis, now, it seems to me that since you're talking about the EU, one of the tenets of Ursula von der Leyen's commission was actually that it wants to be a geopolitical one. Do you see that the EU is starting to play a more geopolitical role when it comes to its relations with Russia, and in that regard with Belarus?
Yeah, in that sense, European Union has to be changed in the very basics. That will mean that European Union will be not anymore normative power. That will be like real power, together with like normative and soft power tools combined with military tools and military power. There is discussion about whether we have or don't have to have a European army. I don't think so. I would like to see strengthen North Atlantic link. I'm afraid that we are not capable to democratize Belarus right now and get them out from hands of Vladimir Putin, because if there will be some significant changes within Belarus, political one, some, I don't know, colored revolution or something, in the same day there will be war between Russia and Belarus, a new power of Belarus. I don't see that Putin is ready to say goodbye to any of post-Soviet nations except Baltic states.
But what do you say to those who refer to the 90s and say that nobody expected that the Baltic states could ever be European and fully democratic as we are?
Yes, I strongly support Belarusians and Belarusian opposition and those freedom fighters. And I respect them, and I'm just say thank you them for this fight. We had singing revolution in the Baltic states, I mean in Latvia, and I'm afraid this time of non-violent revolutions in Eastern Europe is over. Why? Because this is like new phenomena, new old phenomena. That kind of leaders like Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenka, they are not the same leaders like Gorbachev was and Edward Shevardnadze. During Rose Revolution in 2003, Igor Ivanov, he was Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia. He visited Tbilisi during the Rose Revolution in Georgia. And he met with Edward Shevardnadze, head of the Georgian state, and he said, if you will stay in power, if you will try to keep your position, Russia will support you also by military means, if it's necessary. Edward Shevardnadze said, no, thank you. Why? Because he was different kind of leader. He was not, he didn't want to kill his own people. What we see right now with Alexander Lukashenka and Vladimir Putin, those guys are ready to kill their own people. They are already doing this. So I remember during one of his speeches, Lukashenka said, I will say it first in Russian, от Ленина мы учились, что власть нужно держать не трясущимися руками. So we have learned from Lenin that you can't keep power with trembling hands. So if we look to the 19th century Russia, for example, end of 19th century, and then what happened in beginning of 20th century in Russia, like revolutions in 1905, and then in 1917 revolution, then Bolshevik coup, that was results of because Russia was not reformed. This is our perspective, how we evaluating this, and how people in Kremlin seeing this. They are saying, no, those like Tsar and cycle around him those guys just were weak. We have to be confident, and then in X hour we have to be ready to kill people, our own people, and they are ready. This is lessons learned for them. Exactly, and so this is like new old phenomenon, old because Stalin was there, and we can see what is happening in North Korea, and Putin and Lukashenka. If protesters are coming, like let's make it like symbolic, like cartoon, protesters are coming to them and asking, resign, now we are power. And Lukashenka said, no, you resign, you back off. I'm still in power and I will kill you. So this is that kind of mindset, it's different. And this makes me like more pessimistic about democratical changes. Nevertheless, those people who want to build democratic Belarus, they have to be ready. They have to be trained, because nobody knows processes in Russia. If you look to the history of Russia and history of Soviet Union, usually there are like two types of changes. One, they can be stagnation, like during Leonid Brezhnev period, and there was rapid changes in Russian history which took place like in 2-3 days. And nobody expected this. You are right. Yeah, we don't know what will happen in future. That's why Belarusians, those who are freedom-loving people, they have to be ready to take power in the X hour. But I'm afraid it depends on processes within Russia. So we have to support Ukraine, and in strategic way. In this way, we will support Belarus in future. Belarus, democratic Belarus.
Hanna, what strikes me about what Andis said is that the time of peaceful revolutions in Eastern Europe is seemingly over. What options do the Belarusian people actually have in the face of a totalitarian state?
You see, it's very easy, well, not easy, but it's easier to talk about seeing revolutions when the empire, when the headquarters is weakened, right? So we need to destroy the empire first. We need to make Russia weaker, because with the support of the Kremlin, of course, Lukashenko will get as much support as possible, right? Again, this is not the issue of this friendship between the two dictators, but this is the issue for Putin to have an ally, and Lukashenko is his ally, right? And there are many conversations about how Putin is imposing pressure on Lukashenko, and Lukashenko is sort of saying no. Well, there are not many ways for Lukashenko to say no. The troops haven't been sent to Ukraine because the absolute majority of the population opposes it. This is not because Lukashenko said no to Putin, right? There is no evidence that Putin actually ever asked about this. We haven't seen this, right? So I do believe in peaceful revolution, because if there is any consensus in Belarus, it is about peace. people want peace, right? And I do believe also that democracy is much more sustainable when it happens, when it's achieved through a peaceful revolution. But again, we first need to kind of make sure that Belarus is taken out from Russia's zone of influence, right? Zone of sphere of control as much as possible. And I think it's a huge mistake to think that, well, Belarus is now controlled, no hope here, why should we care? Well, with Ukraine it was the same, and you see what happened, right? It just only emboldens the dictators in that way when we don't fight for countries, right? When they just give them away. And I also, what I fear at this point is if the invasion is stopped and, there is the victory, Ukraine wins, right? Then Putin might say that, well, I just need Belarus, and Belarus would be even more important for him than Ukraine, because if he loses Belarus, then he doesn't really have anyone at this point, right? Moldova, but also Armenia is going into a little bit different direction we see now. So he will need Belarus, and Belarus cannot be given to Putin as a trophy after the invasion is over. So this is something that the EU and the democratic world should keep in mind.
Hanna, follow-up. So I understand that the people of Belarus are united for not wanting to get engaged in the war. And this I understand. But I believe many politicians in the West hope that the people of Belarus could also get united against Lukashenka, and thus behind an alternative leader. One of these could be Svetlana Tikhanovskaya as a symbol now of the democratic forces of Belarus. But are the people of Belarus actually united in their wish towards democracy and freedom?
Regarding this opposition to the deployment of troops, let me also mention, right? So we have the Chatham House report that was made in 2022, right after the invasion, saying that, well, 97% of Belarusians is against the deployment, right? So you have 3% who might support it. What does it mean? It means that even Lukashenko's closest circle is against, right? Even his ministers, perhaps even, I don't know, the KGB or who knows who, right? So even this closest circle, it just shows you that there is no support for this. Regarding unity for democratic change, how much more unity do we need to see from Belarusians? We've seen protests and revolutions since Lukashenko came to power. 1996, Minsk Spring, months of protests that were happening, right? But Lukashenko is a dictator. It is first, it's a dictatorship, but it's also something closer to a totalitarian state at this point, because there is no sort of alternative, you're not allowed to express any alternative thinking, and there are some signs of it, right? And how do you protest? Like, how do you show this unity in such a country? What more signs do you need from people? And again, this process has been happening for decades, right? And we can mention all this. And I've been in this movement since I was a teenager, actually. So it's been like forever, and I've seen all of this, and I've seen political prisoners before. This is not the first time when protests are happening, but also state terror is happening. So there were attempts, right? But you cannot just go out to the streets and destroy such a system that has been built for 3 decades. There should be more, right? And this strategy we have already discussed, right? What more can be done? Let's just not give up.
Andis, so perhaps the last question before we wrap up and ask the audience to intervene. Do you think that the EU and in general the West is ready to recognize the democratic opposition of Belarus as a legitimate and equal partner?
I hope so. It's necessary. So I support Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and Paula Tushka. So we have to support that kind of leaders, definitely. Of course, we have to remind our we are also West, but Western leaders, that there is still another Belarus. And there are so many people within Belarus who are against Lukashenko, who are not supporters of Russia's war against Ukraine, and this is great. And also, of course, I'm saying let's not give up. What just I'm saying is that we had also, I said already about singing revolution. During that singing revolution here on the streets of Old Riga, it's not so far away from here, every night during January of 1991, I carried a Molotov cocktail in my front pocket here, Molotov cocktail. We were young sportsmen from sports academy in that time. We were ready to fight. Even if Soviet Union could not collapse in the August of 1991, I'm confident Baltic states, maybe Georgia, Azerbaijan, maybe other, would make war. That would be just a matter of time. I remember our commitment. We were ready to fight. Nobody knows what could happen if really in that January in 1991 Soviet troops would come to Riga, but at least we were ready. So, and this readiness also, I believe, stopped Gorbachev and those guys. Yes, Moscow was weak in that period, of course. I'm not calling Belarusians to make war, so there will be streets full of blood. I mean, yes, I'm not calling that. I'm just saying that I'm quite pessimistic that it will be done somehow to support Belarusian civil society. I remember I was also on the near to Belarus embassy in Riga in protest in 2005 and 2006. We already protested, we supported, and if the result, there is no result.
Thank you very much, Andis. Now, dear audience, I will ask you to come with your questions, but please first introduce yourselves. Albina, you have the mic, please. Charlotte?
I have two questions for...
Charlotte, please introduce yourself.
My name is Charlotte Petersen. I'm the director of the Danish Foreign Policy Society. And I also have a long experience working with Belarus and with Latvia in my former capacity as working at the Danish Institute for Human Rights. So my question is, and I'm following closely the situation also in Russia, and so I have two questions. One is, there is also can you prepare the population of Belarus actually at the same time as you have a totalitarian society? Can you actually sort of, I know that that some people say, you know, they've become YouTube addicts because they're watching so much, you could say, interesting discussions, political discussions on YouTube, so that you actually prepare for like the population's mind for the change that takes place, that they're prepared to go on the streets when the moment comes. Is that a possibility? Is that a strategy? And the second question is there any solidarity at all or any cooperation with the, you could say, the Russian opposition? 128 million people saw Navalny's film on how Putin's palace was made, for example. So there is, and there's recently been a opinion poll, and more than 50% of the Russians want peace now. They want the end of the special military operation. So is the Russian population at all interesting for Belarus in any way in the terms that, you know, for the freedom? So maybe two questions.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And here, just a brief mention, Charlotte Flint Pedersen is also an important founding mother of the Belarus Research Network on Neighborhood Policy. Perhaps, Hanna, we can start with you.
I would disagree with you.
It's good. Let's agree to disagree.
You said that you were at the embassy protesting 2005 or 6, yes, and no, there was no result.
Not real result we expected. So there is no democracy in Belarus, unfortunately.
Sure. The result is hope. The result is what happened in 2020. The population was in the process, you know, of preparing for something bigger, right? I was also disappointed many times. I also want change quickly. I wanted change in 2020. I wanted change in 2010, when I was also on the streets of Minsk, right, protesting, when there was yet another rigged election in Belarus. And, well, I wish it would have happened, but you know, sometimes this path takes longer. I lived in Poland for years. I studied there. 1981, martial law. 1989, first free and fair election. It took them 8 years to get there, right? For us, the path might be, well, not to mention the years of the Soviet Union, right? When Poland was this country controlled by the Soviet Union. So it takes years sometimes, but again, let's be hopeful here, and let's also see these results that are happening. We approached 2020 with this level of sort of quality change of people that happened. And I was in 2020 in Belarus, and I traveled across the country, and I saw how people changed. When some people in regional towns were saying that, well, we want our rights to be respected, I was like, whoa, they don't want salaries to be higher, they want their rights to be respected. This was this quality change that was the result of all these years of protests and all these years of support for civil society, for media, for this sort of, you know, democratic parties.
It's a result of my protest too.
Sure, you should take proud and credit here. Exactly. So you see, it is gradual, but it is happening. Regarding these media strategies, and you know, this is something that I also mentioned, that this is so crucial because what happened in 2020 was also partly because of people's access to media, right? And especially social media, as we might remember. Social media and media, independent media, became monopolists, right? They monopolized people's minds. The regime was not successful there, despite all the money that it actually injected into propaganda, which is very interesting. People were literally following what was happening. You know, everyone was like watching YouTube, right? And this is now became more dangerous. This is now became more difficult because of bans, because of censorship that the government imposed on independent media. Now, for only being subscribed to a Telegram channel, you can go to jail. So imagine how the price of reading news is, you know, has increased. But people still try to get this access. We know about VPNs. We know about how people access websites through mirrors. They still use social media. They, you know, again, watch YouTube or go to Instagram, go to TikTok. Part of the job that I do is to actually access, to kind of assess how people consume information from inside the country. So we are still able to do this research. And people, even those neutral audiences, we call them, those people who are non-users, who don't read news, they still are very sort of, you know, well, we actually don't like propaganda. We want, you know, this alternative information. We actually respect information in Belarusian language, and so on. So they are very conscious, actually, in how they consume this information. And may I compare this to Russia? And you probably know that the situation in Russia is different, right? When it comes to propaganda and how people believe or not. So people in Belarus, you know, this kind of level of sort of trusting propaganda is different, right? So investing in this is crucial, in media, in civil society, because these are the institutions that connect this, bring the necessity of change, right? And kind of keep people informed and keep people motivated.
Do you have a comment on the solidarity with the Russian opposition?
From Belarusians? I think there was solidarity. There was some interesting connection when there were protests in 2020, right? There was this slogan, well, primarily in Russia, actually, that something about Khabarovsk and Brest with a... Yeah. So there were protests in Khabarovsk in Russia, and there were protests, of course, in Belarus, and there was a lot of solidarity from Russians, I think. They were also kind of protesting at that point. When it comes to the situation now, I don't think that Russian opposition is very visible right now in Belarus, right? If you expect people to kind of be very much interested in what's happening, this might not be the case, though still, of course, they consume some Russian media. When it comes to diaspora, I think when it comes to political level, there is no, I don't really see why this kind of really deep cooperation should be happening. I don't think how Belarusian democratic forces and Russian opposition could strengthen each other. You may disagree, but this is, I don't really see how this would work. But I think where the work is happening, where cooperation, collaboration is happening, is between civil society. There are joint projects of media, like Belsa TV has their sort of sub-channel, I put it this way. They report in Russian, and they also reach Russian audiences, which is very crucial. They have like millions of views, and Russians are watching them. So here, there were some great investigations between Russian and Belarusian independent journalists. So this is where this cooperation is happening, and this is where perhaps more effort can also be done, because this is something that this is crucial, and I see here a lot of potential.
Thank you very much. I think that answers the question.
If I may, a few
Please,
words.
go ahead,
I agree
Andis.
with you that providing of valid and trustful information to population of Belarus is crucial, of course. We have to, from the West, look to Belarus like during Cold War. What happened during Cold War, the Western radios and other channels try to influence hearts and minds of the people in Soviet Union and occupied Latvia. So that was really important. Unfortunately, nowadays, Russian and probably Belarusian propagandists are a little bit better skilled than those colleagues during Cold War in Soviet Union, because just a few information, real information, valid information came into Soviet Union. Nowadays, because of internet, there is a lot of information flows which are going into Belarus and Russia, but they are using so-called spin doctoring. Russian propagandists they are seeing that okay, information is coming, and they are trying to spin it to change very meaning of that message. If there is positive message about West, they are trying to make it negative. If it's something negative about Russia, they are trying to spin it. And so it's spin doctoring. That's why they are better skilled, because they have a lot of to do. So when I'm saying, yeah, I don't believe in that this main battle is right now in supporting of civil society in Belarus. I'm not saying that we don't have to do anything. Yes, we have to support. We have to think strategically, the same like during Cold War. And a few words about those Russian solidarity and Belarusian opposition solidarity between them. I remember those comments from Milov and other democratic thinkers in Russia about processes in Belarus in 2020 during revolution. And I think they looked to the processes in Belarus with some kind of jealousy, not in negative sense, like positive jealousy, because they saw that percentage of people who are on the streets of Minsk is bigger than percentage of protesters in Russia. Yes, during this Bolotnaya Square protest, there are huge part of people from Moscow, but still percentage was not there. So the Russians made it really visible, and I believe because of that, in 2020, many Belarusians start to once again believe that changes are possible at all. Because I think, and that was positive surprise for me when I saw that how many people, and I felt pain in my heart when I saw how sadistic is response from Lukashenka and those guys in police. So it's just those. I mean, this is different kind of leadership. Even on the late years of Soviet Union, Soviet leaders were a little bit softer. Those guys are hard people.
Thank you very much, Andis. Question over here, and then Nasta.
I have.
Please introduce yourself too.
Yeah. No, it's working. Okay. My name is Rodion Beglyak. I'm head of Belarusian democratic diaspora here in Latvia, and I have a personal question about the policy of European Union. I just cannot understand personally, I remember the situation during the Cold War, and during that Cold War, you had like an experienced China and Soviet Union on one side, and very like armed to tease the West on the other side. And in that situation, the West like was taking the confrontation like really seriously, and the West managed to win. I just don't understand what in the current situation, when you have Russia, China, and many other dictatorships in the world combined, and having this experience of defeat during the previous Cold War, what makes the West so relaxed and so confident in themselves that basically allows the West to impose so many restrictions on their own behavior. Like you are restricting Ukraine in using the weapons that they are provided with. Ukraine is also restricted on the number on the list of the weapons, on the amount of the weapons. Belarusian democratic movement is also restricted to the like many means that it can potentially use. Like, what makes European Union and United States so confident in themselves in the current situation that they allow to fight with their opponents in half force?
Thank you, Rodion.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's a good question, of course. When I was in the United States in Washington, D.C., and I met with people from foundations and think tanks in 2007, I saw they were really relaxed, not like now. I mean, situation is different right now, in better way, but is not good enough. In 2007, I tried to convince that Russia is changing. There is this democratic transit is stopped. They are going in opposite way. Russian compatriots policy, media policy to our neighboring countries is dangerous. This is sharp power. So it's destroying not really destroying, but undermine processes, democratic processes, and somehow damaging political process in Latvia and other neighboring countries. So some of those experts I met agree with me, but many of them was like in this naive hope from 90s that there is strong democratic transition within Russia, and maybe slowly and somehow, but they will succeed. So in 2014, many of them changed their mind, and for us here in the Baltic states, after 2014, that was more easy to explain what is happening with Russia, what is happening here in the Baltic states, like in frontline states. Unfortunately, Ukrainians are dying for this. So for me now, if I'm communicating with the Americans, it's easy to explain that what is Putin, what kind of leader he is. So their European mindset after Second World War, the idea is never again. And of course, Europeans always will be like hesitating to do something according to hard power by military means or economical means. At least we can see now with economical means. Nevertheless, Germany is already different style of actor of international politics. They are sending troops to Lithuania. It's something we cannot imagine 10 years ago. They are supporting with military means as well, Ukraine. So they're both vectors, both directions. So it's not good enough, I agree with you, but it's better than 10 years ago. So Baltic states are always like advocates of the countries of Eastern Partnership, and Ukraine and Belarusian opposition as well, and Georgia and Moldova. Latvians always, the same like Estonians, Lithuanians, are trying to convince our Western partners that let's have focus on this region too. This is important for all Europe. So we are advocating, we are supporting. It's not just there, but process is happening right now.
Thank you, Andis. I believe Nasta, and then Ambassador, and then Beata.
Thank you a lot. My name is Nasta Zakharevich. I'm a journalist, and I want to ask, we have the situation now when the whole world, mostly like the western part of the world, kind of ignores pretty often the fact that Belarus is also a victim of Russian colonial politics, and we are now, like in the eyes of the world, are united with Russia as aggressors, but not with Ukraine as victims. And my question is, and it affects Belarus in a very bad way, because we see how stakeholders look at Belarusian medias like part of Russian medias and don't support us and stuff. So my question is, what we as civil society should do, should tell more to change this point of view, to remind the world that we are not these little evils who decided to support Russia, that we've been Russified, that we've been colonized. What can we do as civil society for that? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Should we have another question and then?
I think we're fine. So maybe, Hanna, would you like to come in first?
Yeah, of course. It would be also interesting to hear from you, actually, some advice and recommendation. That's great.
You can start.
Sure. A few weeks ago, I was in Warsaw, and I actually talked to someone who was part of this movement in the 90s, right? And I asked him the same question, like, what did you guys do, and what we should perhaps use and do in the same way. And he mentioned basically the same that we've been doing for all these years, right? So more attention, more media, sort of, if you go as a commentator to foreign media and you talk about Belarus, right, there is more attention. And you often see that not everyone is willing to do that for obvious reasons, because of fear, because their relatives or families are in Belarus, right, and there might be repression. The same happens with my family in Belarus, and I'm aware of that. However, I believe that this is, an important mission to talk about what's happening there. Second is to help actually foreign journalists to find angles, topics, what to report, how to talk about these issues, right? Because we see that, there are no protests and there is no picture, nothing to show. And journalists are lost. What should we report about, right? Because there is nothing to show. So perhaps there is something that we can do, something that we can help with, and spread this information. Of course, all this, everyone actually can do this, like students or academics, all this kind of Belarusian diaspora people, right? They can be more involved in the life of their communities or in their countries, and to talk to politicians, to lobby with politicians, to constantly talk about political prisoners and explain why this issue is important, that this is not only a human rights issue, that this is a political and geopolitical issue, and so on. So I think that they lack information, and this is where we can help and close this gap.
Yeah, I would split in two parts. If you are speaking with Europeans, it's good to speak about civil society and support to civil society. It's like more European language to speak about democracy, that Belarusians are willing to establish democracy. So they are suffering because there is authoritarian regime in Russia, which supports authoritarian regime in Belarus. If you speak with Americans, it's good to speak about freedom. You have to be freedom fighters. I lived in the United States 1 year. I was researcher at George Washington University. So there is a little bit different kind of narratives you can use. Actually, I'm really positively surprised about speechwriters for Vladimir Zelensky. When he is making speeches in the West, is just excellent. In the United States, in the front of Congress, it's like, I was surprised. This is a really good one. It's really in the language Americans can understand. And also, Americans like success. You have to show something that you are really fighting. And that happened in 2020. So probably it's not enough. There is a huge problem. I mean, I remember in 2007 also when I met those American experts, and when I spoke to them about Russia, I understood how small Russia is in United States. We are here neighboring countries. For us, Russia is huge. It's a topic, not always number one, but at least in the top 3 issues in the foreign policy, not in the United States. So it's like, even Baltic states, for us it's better to speak about all 3 Baltic states, not just one state. It's like, because it's asymmetry, and also in understanding in this for global players. But the fight for freedom, this narrative you have to show that, and also those who support you, like Baltic nations and others, we have to say that those are freedom fighters. Let's support them.
Thank you very much, Andis. Ambassador?
Thank you. So I am not asking questions. I
Making commentaries.
Join participants from a Ministry of Foreign Affairs side. First of all, I would like to express thank you for this conference and seminar, to keep Belarus in focus. And we as neighbors, and it was mentioned here, we are really here. We are active, per se, by our soul, by our geography, by our history. And we are doing it, and we will do it. For example, there is another big conference always where Belarus is in focus. That's a Riga conference. And I hope that this year again, Belarus will be on the main agenda. So I followed very carefully what was said during this panel as well. I would like only to mention that here, and really say that we are not identifying nation of Belarus with Lukashenko regime. I really, if somebody would like to discuss this issue with me, please come in discussion. We are not identifying. And this is very important what to say. About policies, I would like to underline, not only from the government point of view, and I here be quite brave, from society point of view as well, we are not relaxed, per se. Together with Lithuanians, Estonians, Polish, Germans, we are not relaxed. Our policy is active, and it is twofold policy. We are very critical, of course, of Lukashenko regime. We condemn this regime in all these aspects which were mentioned here. Yes, what Andis mentioned, there were different times in policies. There was some period of engagement as well.
Yes,
there was. In Latvian case, for example, when we tried to move closer Belarus to European Union. But now, if we speak today, we are really very active in European Union, in general international scenes, together with Poland, with Baltic states, to put Belarus in the focus. And from other side, we are in solidarity, and we keep very, very close communication, and we cooperate with Belarusian democratic movement. And not only in Vilnius or in Warsaw, but in Riga, Rodion as well. Could you confirm it? Yes. Okay, good. So we support democratic part of Belarus diaspora here as well. And we will do it, and we will work. There is one issue which is in discussion. It is about understanding of sanctions, maybe. I think if we could come back to academic or other discussions as well, sanctions generally are not meant to change regime. Sorry. Yeah, I understand that everybody thinks that sanctions will change tomorrow some regimes, but generally there is no such experience. We could influence with sanctions regimes, influence, yes, but to change not. And I should underline here what is important. I am a diplomat, but sometimes I should be maybe a politician. Yes. Yeah, I should say that by the end, Belarusian nation is what will change Belarus. Yeah, you expect that, for example, European Union or somebody else will come and change Belarus. Yes, we could influence, and we are doing, and we will work hard, especially in this region. But by the end, it is Belarusians themselves. I would like to understand if we speak about sanctions and all the mechanisms how to work in modern world. So about the will to change, yes, I think in Latvia we think that there is will to change. and 2020 underlined it. What kind of change, we should ask here experts and yourself. It could be different understanding what kind of change, but there is will of change, and we know it in 2020 here is experience. So I repeat here, let's not give up. We will work together with Belarusian democratic forces, with civil society, Belarus now, and we will go ahead, even if it asks strategic patience in a way, but we say in diplomacy. We are here together and we stand here very strong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Okay, and maybe a last question from Beate before we wrap up the event.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Beate Livdanska. I'm from Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and I have just a small question for Mr. KUDORS. We know that Belarusian opposition have started discussion with the European leaders about granting alternative passports for Belarusians in exile. I wanted to hear your thoughts about this issue. Is there any risks, for example, for national security of Latvia? Thank you.
In general, I support the idea for those passports. In Latvia, yeah, we have to think what it would mean for the Baltic states and for Latvia. I like the idea of shadow government outside of Belarus. And during Soviet occupation, Latvians also had passports in the United States. Because of embassy in the United States, and that was also one of the pillar of continuity of the state. We don't have Second Republic of Latvia. We have the same First Republic of Latvia, which was established in 1918. Those passports, issuing those passports for Latvians residing outside of Latvia was also symbolic step. And in the same sense, I think, yeah, during war there is always informational warfare, and action sometimes it's better than saying something, to do something. So to show the Western society, Western, we are West, to Western society that there is alternative Belarus. There is not just Lukashenka. We have even those passports. So we have shadow government. I think let's do it. About Latvia, we'll consider what will it mean for us. So I believe we will manage it. I would support it.
Thank you, Andis. Hanna, any last words?
Let's have more events in Belarus. Let's discuss policies. It's really crucial. It's really important. We keep forgetting. We keep ignoring. And it's not good. So thank you very much for this event, and I think that this is really crucial that we can discuss, we can talk, we can update, right? Because Nasta asked about, what more can we do? So this focus is crucial, attention is crucial, explaining why Belarus is important, right? Not only because it's Russia's sphere of interest, right? Which is not, it shouldn't be, but also because there are many benefits that the democratic Belarus will bring to the continent, to the region, to neighbors. And not only because it will be just a safer country, but because it will, we have a thriving tech community and so on, right? So there are so many things that we can do, and this is something that we can also promote and show, that there is a lot of hope there.
Thank you very much. And on this positive note, I would like to conclude our event. Thank you, everyone who came and dedicated their time to these important discussions. Thank you to Charlotte Flint Pedersen from the Danish Foreign Policy Society. Thank you to Lizaveta Dubinka-Husha, the director of the Danish Cultural Institute, who is hosting us here today. Thank you very much to Irina Romanov from the European Humanities University, who has been our pillar in order to inform us on what is actually happening within Belarus without the shadow of Russian disinformation. Thank you, everyone who's a friend of the network and keeps being interested in a free, democratic Belarus. I will see you in our next event. Goodbye.